Ifunanya screamed. I looked up, blood dripping from my face, and saw them pulling her out of the house. She was fighting, her hands clawing at them, but they were too strong. Amde, she cried, voice filled with terror. Please help me. I tried to get up, but my body wouldn't obey. The gas has beaten me badly, and I could barely move. I watched helplessly as they dragged Ifunanya away. A scream fading into the night. Then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in a dark, cold cell. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and filth. My head throbbed and my body ached from the beating I had taken. I tried to sit up, but the pain shot through my ribs, and I collapsed back onto the rough straw mat that served as my bed. I was in the king's dungeon. I didn't know how long I had been there. Days? Weeks? Time didn't seem to exist in that place. There was no sunlight, only the flickering of a small torch outside the cell door. The guards came once a day, bringing me a small bowl of watery soup and a chunk of stale bread. They never spoke to me. They didn't need to. I wasn't alone in the cell. There were other men there, men who had resisted the king's rule, just like I had. Some of them had been there for months, even years. They told me their stories in low, broken voice. They had tried to protect their wives, their daughters, their sisters, and they had paid the price. We all had. But as the days passed, something began to change inside me. At first, I was filled with despair. I had lost everything: my wife, my home, my freedom. But as I listened to the stories of the other men, I began to feel something else: anger. King Udo has taken too much from us. He had taken our wives, our dignity, our lives. And for what? His own twisted pleasure. The more I thought about it, the more anger grew. I wasn't just angry for myself. I was angry for all the men who had suffered under his rule. I was angry for the women who had been stolen from their families. I was angry for the village of Amaka, once a peaceful and prosperous village, now living in fear. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't stay in that dungeon forever, waiting to die. No, I can't. I had to get out. I had to fight back. It wasn't long before I met the man who would change everything. His name was Charie, and he had been in the dungeon for longer than anyone else. He was older than me, his hair streaked with grey, his face lined with hardship of life, but his eyes were sharp, and there was a fire in them that hadn't been extinguished by years of imprisonment. Charie had once been a leader in the village. He had spoken out against the king's cruelty, and for that he had been thrown into the dungeon. But he hadn't given up. He had been planning something, waiting for the right moment. We can't stay here forever, Charie said one night as we huddled in the dark, talking quietly so the guard wouldn't hear. The king will never stop. He will keep taking our women, keep throwing men like us in here until there's no one left to fight back. I nodded. But what can we do? We were rock-upped, but we have no weapon, no way out. Charie leaned in closer, his voice barely above whisper. There is a way, but it will take courage. Chirie's voice was steady as he outlined the plan. There is a festival coming soon, he said, his eyes gleaming with determination. The king will celebrate the harvest soon. The palace will be filled with food, drink, and guests. The guard will be distracted. I listened intently, my heart pounding. But how does that help us? We are still trapped in this dungeon. Charie gave a sly smile. I have been here long enough to know the guards' routine. They are arrogant, lazy even. At night, only two guys watch over us, and they rotate every hour. One of them, Anayo, owes me a debt from the years ago. He has a soft spot for me. He is willing to leave the door unlocked during his shift, but we need to act fast. Once we are out, we will gather others from the village, men who has lost their wives to the king. We will storm the palace during the festival when the guards are at least alert. The plan was tricky, but what other choice do we have? We couldn't wait to be forgotten in the dark cell, rotting away while the king continued his reign of terror. Chima had hope, and that hope lit a spark in me. Over the next few days, Chima and I quietly spoke to the other prisoner. Some were broken beyond repair, their spirit crushed by years of suffering. But others, like us, were still filled with anger and a desire for revenge. They listened as we shared the plan, their eyes lighting up at the thought of escaping, at the thought of finally getting the chance to fight back. One of the men, Okeke, had been there for 2 years. His wife, Adobe, had been one of the first taken by the king. He said, "I have been waiting for this moment," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "If we fail, at least we die knowing I tried." Another prisoner, a younger man named Ebuka, had been thrown in the dungeon just a month before me. His wife had been taken and he had fought back only to be beaten and left to rot like the rest of us. He was eager to join. "I will do whatever it takes," he said, through gritted teeth. "I won't let the king get away with this." As more men joined the plan, our hope grew. We knew the risk. We knew that if we were caught, the king would show no mercy. But the thought of freedom, of seeing our wives again, of ending the king's tyranny, it was enough to make us willing to die trying. The night of the festival came sooner than we expected. My heart raced as I lay on the cold floor of the cell, waiting for Anayo's shift to begin. The torchlight flickered outside the door, casting shadow on the stone walls. I glanced at Chima, who nodded in silent understanding. Finally, we heard a soft click of the cell door being unlocked. Anayo entered the dungeon, his face hidden in the dim light. He didn't speak, only gestured for us to follow. One by one, we crept out of the cell, movements slow and deliberate. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound of my own breathing loud in my ears. We slipped through the narrow corridors of the dungeon, avoiding the eyes of the few guys on duty. When we reached the exit, I felt a surge of relief as the cool night air hit my face. We were outside, but the hard part was still ahead of us. Chima led us through the village, moving swiftly and quietly in the darkness. We split into smaller groups, each heading to different parts of the village to find the men who were willing to fight. As I moved through the familiar streets of Amokwa, memories flooded my mind. Memories of the peaceful life we had once known before Cain's cruelty had torn it apart. I reached the home of Uche, a close friend of mine who had lost his wife to the king a year earlier. When he opened the door and saw me, his eyes widened in shock. "Nnamdi, how?" "No time to explain," I said quickly. "We are going to the palace. We are taking back our wives. Are you with us?" Uche's face hardened with resolve. "I have been waiting for this day," he said. As we gathered more men, the group grew. Some were armed with farming tools, machetes, hoes, anything they could find. Others had crude weapons fashioned from scraps of metal. We weren't soldiers, but we were fighting for something far more important than the king's men could ever understand. We were fighting for our families, our freedom.